I think it's sometimes the best time to do it is when you've just signed a 3-year contract or you've done really well and you're in a good, because I think that, you've got time on your hands, you've got less pressure. I think that's a good position. Too many people leave it till they're in their last year of their contract, they're in their last 6 months, and there's a bit of panic there of, oh God, I need to find something. What am I going to do? I don't really know. So I think the earlier you can do it and the better position you are with your sport, I think gives you more freedom and opportunity and time to really find out what it is that you want to do.
That was Robbie White, our guest for this week. Robbie's a current professional cricketer for Middlesex, but also works part-time for David James Wealth as a financial advisor. We discuss why Robbie decided to look into his next career after sport, despite being contracted as a cricketer, which areas athletes should look into when considering their transition from sport to life after sport, and tips for athletes to create leads and contacts within the business side of sport during their career. This episode is the last of 3 discussing financial planning for athletes and why it's a serious topic to consider for athletes during their career. Apologies as some of the audio in this episode isn't perfect. Thanks again to Robbie for his time. All of his information is in the episode description notes. Thanks again for listening, and here's our conversation with Robbie White.
Robbie, thanks for joining me and welcome to Chapters. The reason I wanted to get you on is because you've got an interesting career at the moment, because you're a professional cricketer, but you're also working part-time for David James Wealth. And I just wanted to talk to you about how you're juggling those 2 careers at the same time, but also how that came around. So just tell me first why you've got into the financial advice sector.
Yeah, hi Craig. It's great to be joining you on the podcast. Yeah, it's an interesting question. People often ask that when they sort of see that I'm doing something else. I think whilst I'm playing cricket, I've always been clear that cricket is, my priority, and that comes first. That's what I've always wanted to do since I was young. And I'm very lucky that, I've been able to play for a number of years. And yeah, I'm still really enjoying playing, and that's something I want to continue to do. So, that is my focus. What cricket allows you to do, particularly in the winter, you can only train for a certain amount of time. Particularly before Christmas, there's a good amount of time for you to do something else, whether that's a sort of degree, qualification, work experience. People do their coaching badges, things like that. So there's more and more education emphasis now on people to do other things and to try and prepare for life after cricket. So yeah, I was sort of into 2019, so just before the COVID year, I was going to my last year of my contract, and it sort of dawned on me that I wasn't particularly ready for, if the worst did happen, I was again, similar to how I am now, I was hopeful that I was going to play for a number of years. I was still only young then, but, you sort of fear the worst case scenario, and what am I going to do if I'm not going to play? I did a degree at Loughborough, so I sort of had a degree behind me, but I wanted to sort of go into the sort of workplace and see if there were things that particularly took my interest. So I did some work experience at Savills. They were a sponsor of Middlesex. So I did a sort of 6 weeks with them. I then sort of proceeded to try and I met about sort of 10 different people in different industries. So recruitment, finance, accountancy, coaching, sort of sports management. So there was a lot of different areas which I was sort of thought I may be interested in. And I was lucky to be put in touch with James Rice, who's the current CEO of David James Wealth. And he was a sort of very, very good golfer growing up. And he went to America and sort of tried to make it professionally over there. Obviously it was at an incredibly high level, but like with sort of those sports, it's very, very challenging to sort of break through. It's incredibly challenging. So yeah, then he sort of went.
You'll have to tap him up, because I'd like to have him on as well.
Absolutely, I mean, he's great, and he's got a really good story of how he got into. He started running a golf academy in Spain after he stopped playing. So he sort of got experience young of running his own business, and then he got into financial advice, and then sort of took a leap about 2017, I think, to start the company David James Wealth. The 2 people who founded it were him and another guy who was the professional musician. So they sort of had the sport and the music angle, which was quite interesting. So yeah, I had a chat with him. They already had a rugby player, Brendan Macken, who was at London Irish at that point. So he was a bit older than me, but he, like me, in the off season, had downtime and wanted to sort of explore what he wanted to do. And so he was doing 1 day a week working with David James Wealth. So they sort of had a system in which people or athletes could get a taste of what it was like to work for the company and sort of start on the journey of potentially working there full time. So yeah, that was in 2020. So just after sort of that COVID summer, I was lucky enough to play that summer and sign a new contract. But I'd sort of felt like I'd wanted to do something else that would sort of stimulate me and sort of give me good experience to try and progress myself away from cricket. So that's sort of how a long-winded answer, but that's sort of how I ended up getting into David James.
You mentioned how when you went to Savills, various different Savills is an estate agent, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And you went to various different sectors. It sounds similar to Will Fraser, who was a rugby player who was on the podcast, and how he just kind of tried different aspects. Was it he tried different things to kind of bin off what he didn't like? Was that similar for you? Was that you wanted to see what you did and didn't like?
Yeah, 100%. I think, when you put all your eggs in sport as a sort of young, you're on the academy and you're sort of 16, 17 and you're really driven to do that, you end up, and it's your sole drive. And, I didn't do any summer jobs. I didn't do any part-time work because all of my summer was playing cricket. All of my holidays were training. I didn't really have any perception of what normal work was. So I think and the Savills experience was really good, just being in an office, understanding what it was like to get up and go to work, to, be with normal people.
Travel into London.
And exactly, yeah, into central London. So you really get a taste of what, most people go through, which is getting up and going to work and, having colleagues at work who have completely different lives to you, different ages, different interests. So yeah, it is stark contrast to a changing room full of 20 to 34-year-old blokes who are all interested in the similar things, really. So it was really good for me to sort of experience that. And I think, as you say, one of the valuable things by speaking to lots of different people is you almost can rule things out, which is quite useful because there's such a broad spectrum of things that you can get into, and it's almost quite daunting when you're going through all these different industries thinking, well, I don't know what that's like. That could be of interest. That might work. But I think once you actually speak to people, you can actually think, actually, that's not for me, or that might be for me. So you end up narrowing it down, which then helps because it's quite a difficult place to start, just sort of, thinking, well, what possible thing would I do outside of cricket? So that definitely was a good step. And I think, I would definitely recommend people to do that, to try and speak to as many different people in different industries as possible, to try and get an idea of what it is that they do, how their industry works, and then see if it fits your sort of interests and your personality. So yeah, that definitely really helped.
I suppose, how you spoke to Savills, the connections the club have, cricket and rugby and nearly every sport really, they rely on sponsors, don't they? And sponsorship, advertising around the ground. So there will be a natural connection that maybe is always there, but maybe blind to you because you think, oh, actually, we've got a connection right there. Maybe I could go to that sponsor, and maybe there's that kind of
definitely
mutual agreement that sponsors would like someone working for them as well.
100%. And I think it takes that step of, it's not an easy conversation, and especially for, like myself, having not, really know anything about the workplace or what these people do, it's quite a daunting thing to sort of speak to them and ask them if they would mind going for a coffee with you, or whether you could come into their office and have a day with them, or whatever it is. But I think it's a really good step. And what you find most of the time is they're actually really happy to help because they're interested in sport. A professional sportsman is quite a different thing for their day-to-day life, is to have a sportsman in the office who they can speak to and ask questions of. And I think, in my experience, they've always been really eager to help. So I think it's just worth taking that step of actually reaching out and asking people. And I think, as you say, the sponsorship is such a good way to do it because they already got a connection with the club. They already, would have an interest in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sponsors. So that's a really good angle to sort of for all different players to start to think about. Are there connections here that they could make use? Exactly, absolutely. So yeah, I think that's a really good one for guys to look at.
And what was it about the financial advice kind of sector that interested you?
It's interesting because again, it's not something that I'd thought of when I was younger. I hadn't really thought of anything, so I didn't know much about it. I've always had an interest I was good at maths at school, so I like numbers, and yeah, as I learned more about it, I thought, one, I find it quite interesting, the idea of speaking to different people in different situations, different circumstances, different objectives. So you end up spending a lot of your day meeting different people and building relationships, which I find really interesting. And also the piece as an athlete, and that's where it was really good getting in with David James Wealth, with their sort of focus and expertise in the area, was young people sadly don't have much knowledge, aren't well educated in personal finance, and that's a real flaw of the education system. When speaking with David James Wealth, was they're particularly interested in helping educate young people. I think, as I mentioned, the education and knowledge of a lot of younger people is not great with finances. So trying to sort of put them on a good path, sort of speak to them and help them to understand things they should be doing, things they should be avoiding, and sort of just getting them to think about, what's down the line. Because the financial challenge for athletes is very unique. They're obviously going to have a career, hopefully successful career, and do really well for a short period, and then they're going to face an early retirement, potentially in their sort of 30s, mid-30s, and then they're going to have a huge amount of their working life left. And there are so many stories which are incredibly sad. There's a lot of studies done in America and the UK with ex-athletes who end up going down a really bad path and ending up in real difficulty financially. And these are often athletes who have been really successful, have earned very well for a period of time, and because of making bad decisions, poor advice, and they can end up in a really difficult situation. That's really sad to see. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, is helping try and really further educate people and get sort of more information out about things that people should be doing to sort of help themselves. And their future self will definitely thank them for taking this seriously at a young age, because the younger you start, the better.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's just this long-term thinking, isn't it? And kind of trying to forget about today we seem to live in this world of kind of instant gratification. And if we can think that you don't hear anyone say, I started too early, it's all about, if you can start as early as possible, taking care of the finances, then there's the potential for long-term kind of a comfortable life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly, again, the challenge for athletes is that we tend to think, short-term performance. We're thinking about the next game. We're thinking about, how can we maximize what we've got now? And that, that's also a human instinct. So you're sort of, the challenge of getting through to athletes, of trying to think ahead, of trying to sort of map out what their future looks like, and then really start to get into the details of what they can do now to help that. And the reality is, when most sportsmen retire after a successful career, if they're sort of early 30s, mid 30s, that's at the time where their costs are going to be the highest. They might have a young family, they're going to have a big mortgage, they're going to have been used to spending a lot of money because they were likely to have been earning well. So, you have that retirement at a time where it's a real crucial period for your sort of expenditure. And if you haven't made plans and you haven't got
mortgages, you might have kids.
Exactly. Yeah, the mortgage, kids. And it's there's a real need for that to be well planned for, because if it's not, and you see the consequences of what happens when people haven't planned for it, they can't adjust to the change in salary, and they end up in real trouble. So that's something that is an obvious, and it's a real obvious sort of first conversation with athletes. And again, as you say, the earlier you plan for that, the better. People sort of often leave it till they're 34 and in their last year of their contract, staring down, and they sort of suddenly think, what's next. So if you can make that when you're 24.
Have you had experience of that?
With other players who I've played with? Yeah. And I think that conversation is happening more. The PCA, the sort of trade union, are doing more to help athletes think about what's next after they stop playing cricket. I suppose that there's two angles. There's the what are you going to do for a career after you stop playing? So, are you going to coach? Are you going to go into a different job? And, I've spoken about, the benefits of trying to work out as early as you can what things you're likely to be interested in, what things you like to go into. So there's that side of it, which is the sort of the second career. And then there's the finance side of it. What are you going to do to help your transition out of sport into something else? And yeah, I think probably the PCA and the education is getting really strong around second career stuff. But the finance aspect of it, probably still because people are nervous about getting involved with financial advice, getting involved with people's finances because of, bad things that have happened in the past, because you may feel like it's sort of encroaching and it's quite a difficult subject to speak about. I think there's probably still not enough support around that. So yeah, I think it's a massive part of an athlete's career. It's sort of the elephant in the room that a lot of people tend to ignore and put off until it's too late. So that part of the financial advice with young athletes is about making that an easier conversation to have and to start as early as you can to think about how that looks. And I think, personally, one of the things that's really helped me with my cricket is having something else going on in my life outside of cricket, because one, it's I enjoy it and it's nice to have, a sort of environment outside of a cricket environment. But also it sort of gives you peace of mind that when you go to cricket, you can, give it everything and you have something else in the background. So I think the old school attitude is, you shouldn't do anything else. If you're doing something else, then, that's taking away from your focus on your sport. I think that's a very backwards argument. I think doing other things helps you play more freely. It helps you switch off when you're not playing and then be more focused when you are playing. That's my experience. Obviously people are different, but I found that's been really helpful for me, having it alongside my cricket.
Just to go, I kind of saw that interesting article or you shared on LinkedIn about Lucas Neal, the footballer, and how I think he went bankrupt recently. It was interesting about that article was in the comments, there was quite a lot of pushback from people saying, the financial advisors aren't to be trusted. And I thought that was quite interesting how there's almost still this kind of reputation maybe in sport with advisors almost. You remember agents used to be the kind of people you don't trust. I wondered, is there still this reputation that financial advisors, do they actually have the best interest in client? Is that maybe why David James Wealth has former athletes working, is because they want to show that there is that trust?
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. The biggest challenge that the industry faces with speaking with clients is trust. And there's a reason why that there's that issue. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the past that has broken trust and has given the industry quite a bad reputation. And I think particularly in sport, because with athletes, people always want a piece of what you've got. And there are a lot of stories in cricket and in football where people have gone down bad paths with bad people and have ended up in a really bad position, end up losing huge amounts of money from people who they thought at the time were trying to help them and were doing the right thing. So I think there is definitely a barrier up with most people, and therefore it's even more of a challenge and an onus on us as in the industry to try and break that trust barrier and to try and do that with education. Do it by essentially putting the clients first and doing the right thing. And that's one of the big mantras of David James Wealth, is doing the right thing. So I think it's a really big challenge for the industry. And I think we're sort of, still got challenges from the past difficulties that people have experienced with financial advisors back when there was not much regulation and people were, doing dodgy dealings and, really doing things that, really not appropriate.
Taking advantage.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a big challenge. I think that's, part of, I see my role as to try and speak to people from my experience, to try and connect with people on a human level, and really show that we do care about them, their situation, their family, and that's what we're interested in helping them for. So that's a sort of nice challenge for us in the industry to try and tackle that.
And your role at David James Wealth now, did you have to go through kind of accreditation training to do this? Was this similar to what you studied at Loughborough, or was it?
So I studied psychology at Loughborough. So it's, although it is completely different in subject matter, it actually, like I suppose psychology with lots of areas of life is sort of a good thing to have studied for whenever you're dealing with people. So yeah, I did psychology at Loughborough, and then when I joined David James Wealth, they sponsored me through the advisor school. So that's the qualification, the financial advice qualification. So I did that for about a year and a half. That was actually really good timing during the pandemic. So it was a really good time to get that sort of chunk of studying done. So yeah, I passed that once I got that. So that qualifies you to advise. But in order to advise, you need to be licensed, essentially sort of registered with your company to then actually give that advice. And I'm not licensed at the moment. So the idea would be that when I stop playing, I would be licensed, and then I'd actually advise my own clients. So that's something that I sort of see myself doing in the future. But yeah, I've got that qualification now, which was, a tough year and a bit, but I think it's, as I said, there's now a lot more regulation, and yeah, there's a lot more oversight, ensuring that people who are giving this advice are trained, qualified, and able to do so. So yeah, that was a nice thing to get that out of the way whilst I'm playing again. Lots of people leave those things till after they stop playing, and I think it's a good opportunity whilst you're still playing, particularly again in the cricket in the winter. We have quite a lot of time off to do qualifications, training, whatever it is. So I was really glad to sort of get that out of the way when I did.
And just talking about cricket, so obviously you're still playing, you're at Middlesex, but right now you are not in Middlesex. Where are you?
Yeah, right now I'm actually in sunny Adelaide in South Australia. So yeah, it was all quite last minute, but it's something that quite a lot of younger English players tend to do in the off season, is to try and go away and play cricket somewhere where the weather's a bit nicer than England. So yeah, I've been really lucky. I've come out to the same club I've come out to before, about four and a half years ago. So yeah, it's a really good setup. It's a great place to be.
Did they ask you, or did he just turn up?
Yeah, so we've been speaking for the last sort of year or so. I've been keen to come back ever since. Really, it's such a good thing for young players to do. You've got great practice facilities. You got bowlers who are mad keen to run in at you all evening. I've just been to training this evening. Yeah, it's a good standard. They take it really seriously. They train really well, and yeah, it's a really good way to have the off season as opposed to being in an indoor centre. And yeah, it's a great way to spend the winter. And I'll come back in sort of 4 or 5 weeks into March, sort of, which is our main pre-season time where we'll be outside. So it's sort of a great way to sort of get your iron and hopefully get some form ready for the summer back home.
I suppose it freshens you up, doesn't it? And they just kind of been stuck in winter. It's a tough slog from November to March with European grey weather. At least you're getting a little bit of sunshine over there, but also
exactly
playing as well outside.
Yeah, 100%. I think training's great. Some winter training has its purpose, but I think there's nothing like having match time. Nothing like the feedback from, having actual games, innings.
Time in the middle.
Time in the middle, exactly. It's so valuable. I was saying our first game we were over here, I was playing another Middlesex player and he got 60 odd and batted really well, batted for about 80, 100 balls. And I said that 80, 100 balls, because we had a really good bowling attack, and I said that 80, 100 balls is probably worth 2 or 3 months in the winter net. So you get so much more out of that match intensity and the information you get from playing an actual innings in the middle. I feel very fortunate to be out here.
Different kind of confidence, isn't it? And
absolutely completely different. So I think it's a great way to sort of build into the season back home. So yeah, I'm really lucky to be out here.
It sounds like you're lucky with David James Wells to be able to. This isn't an advert, by the way, for David James Wells, blowing smoke and everything, but the fact that they seem to be flexible with you to say, yeah, you go out and play sport. I suppose you're not going to be able to do this forever, so maybe this take that chance when it's there.
Exactly, and the challenge of being a cricketer is my schedule is very very up and down, and particularly in the summer it's very heavy, and in the winter it's obviously very quiet. So it always changes. They've always been brilliant with me, working around my schedule and sort of me fitting in where I can. So it's my, as I said, cricket is sort of my number one focus. I think this opportunity presented itself, and I was going to grab it. I'm not going to get many more years of opportunities to come out in Australia for a couple of months. So I think the opportunity was there. But again, they've been brilliant with helping me with things that I can get on with out here. We've been catching up quite regularly. So it's worked really well, as it sort of always has. And yeah, it's a nice way to sort of have something else going on, because again, over here there are really busy times and there are less busy times. So it's sort of nice to have something else to fill my time when I do have quieter days. So that's sort of continued to progress really well.
So you've been working in the financial advisor for a few years now, a couple of years. Do you think, it hasn't affected your cricket in a negative way? Do you think it's been a positive aspect to your life?
I definitely think it's been positive. Yeah. People, as I said previously, people have different opinions of how sportsmen should lead their lives. I think that having perspective, having different experiences, being in different environments is a massive positive for you, both as an athlete, as a performer, and you in your life and your sort of general well-being and happiness. It's been a big positive for me. I've enjoyed meeting new people, different people with experiences that, are not like mine and aren't like the people around me in the cricket world. And it's given me a real, determination and freedom and energy with my cricket. So I think for me, it's something that works really, really well. I know, often it can happen with people, with athletes when they have kids or when they get in a new relationship, that, that sort of changes the dynamic with their life and with their sport. But for me, in my experience and sort of speaking to other people, I think, having different perspectives in life, having different experiences, I think helps, take the pressure off your sport, helps you relax away from it more rather than sort of laying awake at night, festering over.
I have to think about something else.
Exactly. We often talk about having different interests. I'm a keen golfer. I play a lot of golf. That for me is another thing that sort of, I feel like I'm really escaped from cricket. If it's a challenging time or if it's going well, I can sort of go and play golf, and it sort of gets me away from thinking all about cricket. So I think people are very different. People, some of the great players, I'm sure, they talk about shadow batting in their room all night, and that works for them. So I'm not saying that this is the answer for everyone, but for me, I like having the balance in my life, and knowing that when I go to cricket, I'm giving it 100% and committing to that fully, and then I've got balance and other things in my life that I enjoy away from it. So that's worked well for me from my experience.
Just going back to the financial kind of advice side, is there anything that you learned when you were kind of retraining this role and taking that qualification? Is there anything you've taken away, you thought, oh, this is actually going to help me as, with my own finance?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the first things that when I was speaking to James about joining, he said, if nothing else comes from this, you'll know a lot more about what to do with your own finances. That's what he said. It was really interesting going through the advisor qualification, because, as I said, my knowledge of a lot of these different areas were very small, like most people in the UK. Really, it was pretty minimal. So I was learning about things that I'd never even heard of, not thought about, didn't understand. So it completely changed my whole understanding of personal finance, the finance system, and it is an incredibly helpful thing in your own life, as well as sort of learning how to help other people. And I think one of the things we speak about is making sure that you're doing the things that you preach to others. So that was the first thing with going through the advisor school, is you fully appreciate and start to really understand what things you should be doing, understand why things are certain ways, and I think, a good start is sort of looking at your own situation, and then, as you sort of become an advisor and go into that, then you're in a good position to speak to others and understand what their situations are, what they want to get out of it, and then you were in a good place to sort of help them get to their desired position.
And what kind of specific areas do you look at? Is it kind of budgeting? Is it kind of tax issues? Is it kind of the ingoings, outgoings? Is it that kind of areas?
Yeah, so it's quite broad financial advice. So it's sort of financial planning anywhere from mortgage and protection we do, and then it's investment needs, retirement planning, and a lot of that, the stuff you talked about there, budgeting, looking at your cash flow month on month, looking at where to keep certain pots of money, looking at your tax position, just all these things. There are so many different aspects to it. And you're looking at your family situation, your parents, your wife, your kids. There's so many different parts that you can start to unwrap once you sort of build that relationship. And I think you start to, where you're really effective is where you're fully involved in, their situation, what they want to get out of it. And then you can start to really build a plan that's helping them get there. So there's a huge amount of different aspects we look at. But it's sort of taking, all their financial sort of objectives.
You need to sit down with that person and really just start from the beginning, is it?
Absolutely.
See what they want to achieve.
Exactly. So it's purpose-led financial planning. It's understanding what they've got now, where they want to get to, and then essentially coming up with a solution that gets them from A to B. And that might be many different solutions. That might be one solution, that might be doing nothing, but it's often, there's a lot that goes into that, and you end up, setting out with a plan, and then as often happens, things change, particularly with athletes. There's often lots of things that change along the way. They might, in a year or two, be, absolutely flying, way ahead of where they thought they'd be. They might be injured. They might be in a completely different position to where they were when they started. But having an initial plan to sort of adjust from is a really strong position to be in. So I think sometimes with sports, when they say, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in a year or two. So that almost becomes an excuse not to do anything. But I think having a sort of blueprint in place is a really good position to then have that constant monitoring and tinkering with the plan to ensure that, you're still on track or you're not on track. What do we need to do? What can we deploy to make sure that you're still happy with where things are going? So I think that's a big part of dealing with athletes in their sort of ever-changing and sort of fast-paced way of life.
Do you think that that's another kind of potential reason why more people don't make that first contact to ask for financial advice? You mentioned before how it's not part of the kind of school curriculum, and that we're not maybe educated to it as the same we are taking science or even yes or whatever. Because there's so much of it that we just don't know. We don't ask that question in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people are nervous about talking about it. One, because money is a bit of a taboo subject that, people often don't like talking about in general. And also, as you say, people don't know what they're talking about often. They don't understand it. So that creates a natural sort of nervousness and, sort of hesitation about really getting into the detail. So, it's completely natural and it's understandable. And I was like that. And I think most people were like that. And I think, another role of us as advisors is to make people feel at ease with speaking to us and make people feel comfortable with talking about their situation and their finances. And people are very different. Some people are very, very open and have no issues. Some people are much more reserved and closed about it, and it takes a bit more time and careful communication to sort of open them up. So and also some people are quite knowledgeable and have real interest in it and follow people on YouTube and have really tried to understand it and have done stuff themselves. Some people have no knowledge at all. So again, part of the role, and that's something that I sort of really enjoy, is you're trying to work out the personality behind the person you're speaking to, trying to help them feel comfortable, try and help them really engage with you, because if they're open and engaged with you, that enables you to do a much better job with helping them out. So that's a real sort of interesting part of the role is sort of dealing with different personalities and different people that we sort of deal with every day.
So my last question is, let's say, obviously you're not retired yet, but you're a good example of someone who is, you're a professional athlete, but you have something on the side ready to transition. Not everyone will have that in place at your age. What advice would you give to another cricketer when they're getting towards, 25? They have a contract, but you never know what could happen with you. So what advice would you give a 25-year-old cricketer to prepare for them for after sport?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, again, there's two parts to this. One would be the part we touched on about trying to experience and understand more about what things you're interested in doing after you stop playing. So whether that's going to be coaching, whether it's going to be umpiring sort of, or management within the sport, or whether it's going to be something outside, a different career altogether. And I think the more you can speak to different people, the more you can try and put yourself in situations, of different industries, speaking to people who have had different careers, who have also gone through the same things you've gone through. I think the more you can do of that, the more you start to narrow down what your options are and what things that you think will be of interest to you. And I think the earlier you can do that, the better. I think it's sometimes the best time to do it is when you've just signed a 3-year contract, or you've done really well and you're in a good, because I think that, you've got time on your hands, you've got less pressure. I think that's a good position. Too many people leave it till they're in their last year of their contract, they're in their last 6 months, and there's a bit of panic there of, oh God, I need to find something. What am I going to do? I don't really know. So I think the earlier you can do it and the better position you are with your sport, I think gives you more freedom and opportunity and time to really find out what it is that you want to do. And then I say, if you can narrow it down to something that you think is definitely of interest, then potentially look at doing qualifications, training, studying that can put you in a advanced position when you do stop playing, because then you're going in at quite a higher level, as opposed to sort of starting at the bottom rung. And I think that's always something I was nervous of, is at 27 or 32 or 35, whatever it was, if you were to join a company there with no qualifications, you're essentially going in as a 19 or 21-year-old. So so you want to try and start as get ahead, so then you're starting with a bit of a head start. And the other thing, what advice would I give to a sort of young cricketer would be to really take time to look at their finances, because it's something that's going to have a huge impact on their life. And people tend to ignore it, don't want to speak about it, don't really look at it. So I'd say, get a grip of your finances, start to look into, everything you've got, and look at things that you want to try and get to when you're older. Have a think about how that may look when you're older, and ultimately really engage with that. Speak to other players, speak to advisors who, are credible and have good reviews, good reputation, to start actually putting a plan in place, so that when you do transition, you've got a good idea of what you want to do career-wise, and you've got a good plan in place financially to sort of support that alongside. I think that's a really good position for a 24, 26, 28, 30-year-old to be going into their sort of second half of their sport career in that position. I think would be a really good, exactly.
Exactly.